Hello, Reset with Raven family, newscaster, sportscaster, and weathercaster. Today's guest, George Siegel, has worked across the country from Seattle to San Francisco to San Antonio. After 14 years in the television news space, George had a change from in front of the camera to behind the camera. Welcome, George.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on.
I am excited to have you. Now, what stood out to me about your career journey thus far is that after 14 years, you had a reset. And now, many people listening have been doing something for years or decades, and they feel that they can't change or start over or go down a different path. So, talk to us about your pivot from being on TV.
Sometimes we make that leap on our own, and sometimes there's somebody behind pushing us off the cliff. In my case, the station, out of the blue, just decided, George, we don't want you anymore. Go do something else. And I was faced with a situation where I could continue to bop around the country and look for another job, or I could try to reinvent myself and do something else. And at that point, I was pretty disillusioned with the television news business. A few weeks before they fired me, the consultants were in town and they met with all the talent, and they sit down with me and they go, wow, we think you're doing a fantastic job. We really don't have much to tell you that we would change about what you're doing. Just keep doing the great work that you are. And then a few weeks later, they fired me. So it really was an awakening of, okay, I've had enough of this business. There's too much that I can't control, and it's by people that I don't respect. So why don't I try something else? And I said, well, what other skills do I have? And I had skills in production and putting together stories. So I started my own video production company. And it's a lot different. You do take risks when you go out on your own. When you're working for somebody, you get a check every week or two. When you go out on your own, it's not guaranteed. Your check is going to be based on what you're able to generate. And if you have a family, it can be a scary time. So I took the leap, and I'm glad I did. I miss the money from the business, but I don't miss the business. I don't miss the management types in that business. They're very driven by agendas and self-interests, and it's good to be free of that.
Got it. Well, just to take us back, I have some follow-up questions about that. But how did you even get on TV or get into that world? Because I right now, especially in this like influencer world and people wanting to be on TV or celebrity type life, how did you get into that field? And was it all that I guess glitters that many people think that comes along with being on TV?
Well, it has its pros and cons. When I got into television, there was no social media. So that was the way you would get your word out, or you'd have to be on television. Now you can be on your phone, you can be on your computer, you can be, there's 100 different ways you can get your message out there, which isn't always a good thing, because we're empowering people to have a voice that probably we don't need to hear from a lot of the time. And it's also enabled a lot of people who we should hear from now have access. So it's like a double-edged, it works both ways. When I got started, I graduated from college and I was sending tapes all over the country trying to get a job. And I got an interview in a place called Bakersfield, California. And I walked in the door. I thought I was going in there for a sports job. And the guy said, our weatherman just quit yesterday. Do you know anything about weather? Can you do weather? And I said, sure, I know weather. I knew nothing about weather. So they put me in front of the map and had me do an audition on camera. And I mispronounced one of the cities, and the cameraman started laughing. And rather than say, can I start over? I screwed up. I just leaned over and said, why don't you just tell me the right way to say the name? And the guy did. I kept going, corrected myself, and finished the audition. And the news director loved it. He goes, wow, this guy's good on his feet. He doesn't, he can handle this, the pressure of doing something live. So that was the start. And the rest, as they say, is somewhat history.
I like that. That's a quick master class of, I guess, diligence and perseverance and not letting anything, I guess, rattle you. And people appreciated that. They were like, "Oh, okay, he can hang. This guy is the real deal." And one of the things you said that stood out to me is about empowering people that maybe shouldn't have a voice. And we're I think in like an age right now where people are famous for nothing or people are famous for doing something that's not positive. Back to when you talked about like kind of your experience in like the media world, what are some of the things that for us outsiders that you would say like felt uncomfortable for you or felt like, this is not something I want to do for the rest of my life, or something that you were like, I'm kind of disenfranchised with?
Well, I can only speak for the business I was in, and maybe other businesses are like this, and people are going to go, it's like that everywhere. But they really sell themselves as, we're your community station. We're here for you. We're a family, until you're not. Once they don't need you anymore, they kick you to the curb and you're not family anymore. You wouldn't treat your family the way they treat people. And it's also the agenda that they have, the tone they set for the day, and the stories that they cover. And, when I was doing weather, I worked for one guy. Gosh, I couldn't stand this guy. And he used to make the anchors congratulate me on being right, even when the forecast was wrong. That attaboy pat on the back, like, hey, George, you nailed that one. And I said, do you think people are stupid? Are they that stupid? Weather is the one thing that if I tell you, go have a picnic Saturday, it's going to be beautiful, and it rains on your picnic, that's the only thing you're talking about, is that idiot on Channel 4 that told you it was going to be nice weather. And I thought you should go on and explain why the weather changed. But he wouldn't let me do that. He said, no, you never admit you're wrong. And so it's it's stuff like that. And like I say, people listening might go, come on, George, that's no big deal. You're just being a baby. But when you're doing that for a living, you take a pride in it, and you want to have an honesty and a connection with the audience. But the station doesn't really care about that. What they care about is ratings. And if they don't get the ratings, they look for a reason why. And it's usually the talent and not their incompetency in the management field.
So new producers come in and that's the end of your job. You get axed, correct? Or new management?
It was a new news director.
Okay.
George wasn't his guy, and he wanted to get rid of me, and he did.
So talk to us about what we're in this age of, what is it called? The big quit, the great resignation. People are realizing their worth, their value, or recognizing that life is short. Like, this pandemic is putting things back into perspective for some people, or for a lot of people, and recognizing, I don't like this job. I don't like this career field. I don't feel valued here. Or this is just, maybe I'm getting the attaboy, the accolades, the acknowledgement, but it's not fulfilling to me. So talk to us about what that pivot, or as you use the term, reinvent yourself. What was that journey or process like for you? Did you immediately know what was next? Did you like get fired that day and take some time to like regroup? What was that process or journey like for someone who also right now is thinking about leaving, or may have been told like your time is up?
It took me a little time to process, because I did not see it coming. I did not know that was the direction. Because what I would advise anybody, and I know people get frustrated with their job, and a lot of people are treated poorly at their jobs. Don't quit your job until you have something else. Don't walk away from a paycheck with the risk of no paycheck, because that's a very scary feeling. If you have a mortgage, if you have car insurance, if you have kids to take care of, it can be a very scary thing to all of a sudden say, hey, I'm proud that I walked out of there, but now how are you paying your bills? And so I think it's that saying my dad used to always tell me, it's easier to find a job if you have a job. And it makes you, because it's one less thing you have to explain. You don't have to explain why you were fired. It's easy to say, yeah, I'm not completely thrilled with where I'm working and I want to switch. But once you say you're out of work, you have to spin another story. And that's not always an easy story to do. And they might call that place and ask about you. I got a job once in Seattle, and I had a bad experience in a previous job. And the news director said to me, if I called this place, what are they going to say about you? And I told him the truth. They're going to say, well, George needed to grow up a little bit and be more. And he called those people, and they didn't cost me the job, because I already gave him the answer he was going to hear from them. And, things like that are important. If you're spinning a tale about what you do, you better make sure you can control all of it. My belief is, if you're honest and straightforward, it'll do you more justice, because then you don't have to get a bunch of people to cover for you. Your truth will tell itself.
That's good. So you are done from that job. You're taking some time. Are you doing like a skill set inventory? Do you know you're going to go into entrepreneurship? Do you start applying for other jobs? Do you move? What's that like? And also too, in that interim, we just talked about too, like bills, real life. How is that affecting you or hitting you, and how are you managing that?
Well, that went south in a hurry. I was also in a bad marriage. That went down the tubes. I had 3 kids, and all of a sudden I had no job. And my wife at the time wanted me to move somewhere else and keep us going, keep the wheel going. And I just said, I'm not doing that. So I thought of what skills do I have? And like I said in the beginning, I'm good at telling stories. I'm good at writing stories, creating, having creative ideas. So I thought video production would be something that I could do. So I started a video production company. And because people knew me in town, I was able to get some clients and kick up the business pretty quickly. But it's a very scary thing, because I think a lot of times employers, when they're firing people, sure, they have a business to run, but they don't think about what they're doing to the person they're getting rid of, unless the person's a real jerk and they just had to go. There's a lot of things that can go wrong for people. It's a stressful thing. And so when I hear about mass layoffs and companies just cutting people left and right, it's heartbreaking to know what that does to people and what it can do to them. It's a very scary time when that happens.
So you were very fortunate that you had some contacts or connections, as well as a reputation within the community to sustain you as you're building. Is that correct?
Yeah, probably more fortunate than some, but it still is difficult, because at the job I had, I was making a good salary, I was doing really well, and then all of a sudden you're not. And those that can be very tough. It's very tough emotionally, mentally. And when you're led to believe something and then something else happens, you have to kind of regroup and get yourself together. But nobody's going to feel sorry for you. You can sit around and go, "Oh, poor me." It's like, no, that's not going to work. You got to get out there. I can handle rejection and being beaten down. It doesn't stop me. It just motivates me to do better.
That's good. It reminds me of what my dad always is telling me, that there comes a day where everybody has to stand on their own 2 feet, and we're in this like survival of the fittest. Like no one, and also to reminding yourself, everybody has their own stuff, their own issues, problems. So having a pity party and hoping that people are going to like, oh, feel sorry for you. People have their own things that have their attention. So pick yourself up. It's like pick yourself up, Buttercup. So no, that's definitely a really good point. I wanted to ask too. So you have a company, film production, and it's called Move the World Films, correct?
Yes, it originally was JEL Productions, and that was
Okay.
named after my 3 kids.
Oh,
And then when I started the film company, I changed, so it's a doing business as Move the World Films.
okay. What's behind that name?
When I was growing up, my dad used to always tell me, he had this quote from this figure Archimedes, and he would always say, "Give me a lever big enough and I can move the world." And he would say that a lot. And so when I was looking for a company to start, I was going, okay, I want to make documentary films. We really want to make a difference. But how do you do that? Well, if you try hard enough, if you give me a bigger lever big enough, you can move the world just a little bit. And if you move it just a little bit, maybe you enact some change. And that's what I try to do with the films that I've made, is hope that it creates a conversation and then maybe leads to change, maybe leads to people doing something. But the idea is, it's not an easy thing to do, but you give it a shot.
Hmm. It also reminded me of what my grandma used to say. She said, "If it was easy, everyone would be doing it." So
That's
when you're
true.
doing something that's challenging or difficult, or that's worth it, then you got to keep at it. Um, so creating change, or being a part of change is really um, important to you. Talk to us about the films that you've created so far, and the impact that you're hoping, or maybe these films have already had.
Well, neither one of them, obviously, I don't think either of them have moved the world yet. And, that it's tough. There's a lot of content out there for people to digest. And so you don't really know. You hope over time that you can have some success with yours. I made it. My first film was called License to Parent. And it was about the parenting problem in this country, how it's the most important job in the world. And we let anybody do it. Anybody can have most people, you can have a child. That doesn't make you a parent. The job starts after you have it. And a lot of people do that because they think they want to have a family. But if they had to fill out an application and maybe take a quiz to see if they were qualified, but a lot of them would not be given kids. They would say, no, maybe you should be doing gardening, or maybe you should try sales. You shouldn't be a parent, because it's a tough job. And we don't support parents enough. We don't educate them enough. The reality is, when you're leaving the hospital with that child, the only thing society cares about is if the car seat is strapped in properly. Everything else, you're on your own, folks. And I think that's scary. And I think we don't do enough to help parents. So that was the idea behind that film. And, it's gotten out there, but did it change the world? I mean, we haven't fixed the parenting problem in this country. That's not an easy fix. So.
I'm curious, where does your inspiration come to? Like, what made you to start researching or investigating that? Where does that come from?
Well, I'm always analyzing myself as a parent and thinking,
Oh.
am I doing a good job? And I'm one of those parents that's always open to getting better. There's some parents that think their kids are perfect and they're raising little friends, and they're just pals with their kids. And then there's other people that go, this is a job and I need to be on my best level at this job. It's not an easy job. And so I'm always set. I don't call myself a great parent by any means. So I thought this would be a great film to make. I met a lot of interesting people. I met some horrendous parents who lost their kids because they had drug problems, or has struggled because they were a divorced family and they didn't have money. They just a lot of things. Kids ending up in foster homes. It's rough for a lot of people.
How did you get access to different like parent groups, or what was like the research, or how does that work in terms of creating this film?
Well, I was able to get access to some. I lived in San Antonio, Texas at the time, so I was able to get a family court judge, and then some of the local child support groups that, Child Protective Services. Obviously, they have to protect the anonymity of children, but a few kids stepped forward and agreed to be interviewed. And then we went up to Minnesota, where Minneapolis and I think the entire state is one of the only places in the country that has parent education that's paid for by the state. And they offer parenting classes where parents can sign up and go in and be around other parents and brainstorm and talk about issues that they're having. And I think that's so important. If you think about the last time you were on an airplane or in the grocery store and you see some mom struggling with kids, or dad, you roll your eyes and go, God, no, you have no idea what's going on there. And they shouldn't be met with scorn. They should be met with, hey, is everything okay? Can I help you with anything? It's just a different attitude that we have to approach it, that people are struggling. Let's put out a hand, not an open hand pushing them away. And, a lot of people just don't want to be bothered.
I was having a conversation with my friend the other day. We're both at the age where a lot of our friends are having children, having families, and we were saying like we recognize now the importance of like that foundation, like how having, I guess, great parents that can set you up for success and help instill certain values, principles is so important. And we were talking about how we feel like it's kind of like overlooked, or people don't invest as much time in that. And my mom's a teacher, and one of the things she taught elementary school before she retired, and one of the things she would frequently say to me is that people think like this is all on the teacher. And granted, they are a very instrumental part in the development of children, but we've all heard this phrase, it starts at home.
It does, and it's cyclical too. If you live in a home with abusive parents, or you have one of them drinks, or they have a bad temper, that gets passed down from generation to generation, and it's breaking that cycle. And we heard some horrible stories about things that kids went through. And what always hurts me when I hear these stories on the news, there's a certain innocence that children have until it's taken away, whether a child is kidnapped, whether they're abused, whether they're bullied. And that innocence is destroyed. And it's heartbreaking when that happens, because all of a sudden it's a different world for them. And I think we have to do a better job of keeping that, I don't want to say bubble, but children need us looking out for them, not taking advantage of them.
What if anything, like stood out to you the most or shocked you the most after creating this film and getting access to this information and talking with these parents and children?
I think the cost to society of bad parents. So one of
Mhm.
the statistics, and if I'm a little off on it, it's still the gist of it is true. If you raise a child that's a productive member of society and goes out in the world and does good things, they're worth $1.4 million to society. But if you raise a bad kid who causes problems and does all kinds of things, goes afoul with the law, it costs society $2.8 million. So the swing there is substantial in the damage that it costs. So if I'm going to be a crappy parent and I don't care about my job, that's fine if I live out in the woods and we never go into town. But once my children become part of society, the job I did affects other people. And somebody, you need to be accountable for that. We saw that in that, I think it's in Michigan, the family that the son who shot some people, and that turned out the parents knew he had a gun and they knew he had
Mhm.
ammunition and they didn't do anything about it. They're probably going to jail. That Gabby Petito story
Oh, it's terrible. Yeah.
here in Florida. Those parents knew their kid. If you go away on a road trip with your girlfriend and come back without her, something's wrong. That is parenting
And then
at its
go on the
worst.
run yourself. So
Yeah. So, parents need to be on their game and they need to be open to getting better at their job all the time. It's a work in progress.
yes, yes, indeed. It's kind of like daunting. I don't have any children yet, but recognizing like the what it requires to like raise a child instead of just like be a person who delivers a child. It's different than actually
Take
being
your time.
yeah,
Don't
like a
rush.
parent that's there and is committed and devoted to the development, the healthy development of their child. And the other film, what's the name of the other film?
It's called The Last House Standing, and it's about how we blindly buy houses or live in structures without truly understanding the risks that we're taking. We live places where we don't know how dangerous it is. We don't know how safe our house is. And then every year, billions of dollars of houses get destroyed, and people look around going, how'd that happen? And the answer is we are allowing it to happen. And the theme of this film is around a house in Mexico Beach, Florida, when Hurricane Michael hit in 2018. And this one house on the beach that built way above code with pylons that went down into the sand, this house is standing and everything around it was wiped out. And not everybody's going to build to that standard. Not everybody can afford to build to that standard. But there's things that everybody can do to make their house safer, but most people don't worry about it. Most people don't know their insurance policy. They've never read it. Most people don't know what the flooding could be like in their neighborhood because they've never worried about it. They don't know how their roof is bracketed to the house because their builder never told them. So there's so many things we need to know, but nobody's going to tell us. There's no savior here. There's no Captain America that's looking out for us. It's us. And we have to stop rewarding bad building and start being aware of what we're buying, because we are our own last defense here. If we continue to do this, the same problems are going to continue to happen. And it's about us demanding more for what we get.
So basically, do your research. Know
So a
what
lot of
you're
research.
buying, and know what you're
There's a lot of
buying, know what you're
resources.
moving into. Yeah, and the
Yeah.
information is out there. That's interesting that you talk about like flood zones. I lived in Houston during Hurricane Harvey, and
Yeah.
there were so many people that lost their homes that were not in a flood zone, had never had flood insurance, never even thought about it, and just were not. It was just completely unprepared and shocked beyond belief and devastated as well.
Well, there's a lot of things that are sad about that story. But probably the worst is if you do not live in a flood zone, flood insurance costs very little money. You could
Mm.
probably get flood insurance for $300 or $400 a year. Now, for somebody who's struggling, maybe if you're really at odds with coming up with funds, that may seem like a lot. But look at what happens when you don't have it. People that had $150,000 homes got nothing. Their house had to be demolished because water just does not go away like you would hope it would after the flooding is over. And so, flood insurance, and if you don't live in a flood zone, people can't at the end of the year go, wow, we didn't have flooding this year, so we don't need the flood insurance. I didn't get in a car accident, so I can raise my deductible. You need to look at that as a cost of you're living your life and have that protection all the time. And you don't evaluate it by good or bad, because you could go out tonight and get in an accident. So the idea is to be prepared and not kick yourself if you were over prepared, because you're sure going to kick yourself if you're underprepared. And we see that story again and again. And we show a lot of them in the film, that people that just didn't think it would happen to them, nobody thinks it's going to happen to them. And then it does. And then it's too late.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing I think about like life or just disappointments or just extreme uh, casualties or events like that is that nope, everyone thinks like it won't happen to me. My background is in healthcare, and I remember we would see so many motorcycle accidents, and almost every person that came in, like people know like the data on motorcycles, and I had a professor who in my statistics class used to call them organ donors, but people continue to get on those bikes, and it's almost as if it's like, oh yeah, it won't happen to me. That's them over there. It's very very interesting. One of the things I'm curious about is when we think about life and we think about like especially like the work you're doing for documentaries, why do you think it's so important, or what's important to you about taking a stand or having a position on something? Because that's what I get when I look at a documentary. It's like not well, the documentary presents the information, but I'm also curious to know, like in news, like of course you report out the information, but in this angle, you're also too saying like, hey, know this, be aware of this. You're also taking a stand and actually pointing people's attention to something. Why is that important to you, or what can we all learn from that?
Well, it's important to me to do it in a way that I thought was non-political, because a lot of documentaries that I watch, I know that a Democrat or a Republican made it and they have their agenda and they went in looking for that story, and then they wanted to tell that story to make the other side look as bad as possible. I care about homeowners here. So we're the party. The political party here is homeowners. We're all the same. Republicans, Democrats, race, gender, everything. We're all the same. We all need to be our own best advocate. And that's the direction the film is told from. That's the story. The same with License to Parent. And so is there an enemy? Is there an evil empire in the story? If you had to pick one, it's probably the builders, because sure, in a perfect world, they would build strong houses that would survive disasters. But when I've talked to builders, they said, well, what if we spend all that money building it and nobody wants to buy it? What are we going to do? We're going to lose money. We're in this business to make money. And the reality is, remember when you're going to be too young for this. We used to not have to wear seatbelts when we drove cars. There used to not be airbags in cars. If you got in an accident, it was whatever happened. And more safety standards came in. That needs to happen with construction. We need South Florida tough building codes so houses can't blow down. We need better fire codes, better houses that survive hurricanes and all kinds of disasters. But if we wait for government or builders to just go, hey, let's do it. Builders have a lobbying industry to keep the codes low, so they don't have to build that fortress of a house. So we have to demand it. We have to say, how safe is this house? How did you build it? Is it concrete block on the first and second floor? Is it at the flood level? Can I get a flood certificate for this? What about the fire danger in this house? All the things that could go wrong, we can't assume they're looking at for us. Because in any house I've ever built, once I start going over it with a fine-tooth comb, I hate that expression, but it's true, you start finding things where they didn't necessarily do their best. And that's just, maybe it's human nature, but if we're not our own best advocate, it's not going to work out very well in most cases.
That is very interesting. So, if you don't inspect or make sure that you oversee something, people tend to cut corners sometimes.
Well, it's only as in construction, it's like a lot of jobs. It's only as good as the person watching the people working. Because I've seen houses, because I've done a lot of shows on home building, and where somebody has flooding and they have to tear the walls out, and they find all the food bags and garbage and things that the guys threw inside the walls, or they have a leak in their roof and they find out there was a gap where they didn't put the sealing material there because they ran out and they just closed up the roof. I mean, you hope that doesn't happen. And it's not just in building, it can happen in any job. You hear people get a rattle in their car because somebody tossed a bolt in construction. You want to assume everybody's on their A game and always is doing their job. But if you can inspect it, maybe you can find out where maybe some of the shortcomings were. And the only loser here is going to be you. You go to sell that house or you start paying for all that damage, they're not coming back to help you unless you have a great warranty. So why would you take that risk? If you're buying a home, especially an older home, inspect the heck out of it. Get the toughest, badass man or woman inspector out there and make sure they look for everything. And if you have to bring a few extra people out there, you got to do it because that's your one shot. And it's tough in such a competitive real estate market because if you come in and want to do all that stuff, they may just take the next person on the list to sell the house to. Maybe they're doing you a favor by doing that.
Yeah, there's like bidding wars right now. It's like terrible to try to purchase a home right now. It's pretty challenging. And the ones that are going up, who knows what you're getting.
Yeah. And if you find a lot of problems, they might just say, we're not going to fix that.
Someone else will take it.
Yeah. And that's the problem. But you know what? Like I say, they're doing you a favor because you can't fall in love with it and then accept the problems because the problems are going to be your problems. Unless you can get them to fix them or you can afford to fix them, why would you take that on just because you like the location or the backyard for your kids or, the new granite countertops? That's not going to save you in a hurricane. So you have to think beyond the moment, definitely.
I love that. And I think that's a great segue to our close. You said they're doing you a favor. What's been the best thing for you about changing from being in front of the camera to behind the camera? Because we talked about you being fired, but were they really doing you a favor?
That's a tough one to say that because of what I had to go through at the time and how it turned my life upside down and how awful they were to me in how they handled it. So at the time, I didn't see it that way. But the best thing that ever happened to me in the long run was getting away from that entire situation. So it worked out well because I'm not a quitter, because I'm not going to let somebody just run me out and say, you're no good. I'm saying, well, okay, I'll find something, then I'll prove that I am good at it. So it just motivated me. It wasn't a lifelong thing. And then I like not having to answer to somebody. And even when you're in the film business, if you have your own company, ultimately you have to answer to people because if somebody funds your film, they're going to have an opinion. If somebody's going to distribute it, they're going to have an opinion. The places that air it are going to have an opinion. So what it really taught me is my opinion isn't the only one that matters. You have to be able to work with other people and listen. If they have suggestions, don't argue with them. Listen and then evaluate it and then act accordingly. But it's a little different when you're on your own than when you're working for somebody directly. That's your paycheck. You really have to listen to them.
That's good. And I'm sure our listeners will want to continue to follow your journey and to see what other content that you continue to produce. So before I ask my final question, where can we find you online?
There's two places that are really good. One is movetheworldfilms.org. And there you can rent both my films. You can see The Last House Standing on Tubi if you want to watch it for free. But movetheworldfilms.org. And then tellus.howtomakeitbetter.com is my podcast site. And I have 27 episodes on there, or however many by the time this airs. But it's about people that have recognized problems and rather than complain about the problems, are looking for solutions and solving problems. And so that's why I call it Tell Us How to Make It Better. Don't complain. Tell us how to make it better. That's the goal. And at tellushowtomakeitbetter.com, you can see what we got going.
I love that. And the final question is, what is the greatest lesson you learned in your reset?
I think it's humility, having a sense of who you really are and what your value is. And then, as part of that lesson, when you're younger, you think everybody needs to hear your opinion and your opinion matters. And what I've learned is most people don't care about my opinion unless they ask for it. And I brought that to my new career when I had clients and they would have a commercial they wanted to do. I would say, do you want me to tell you what I think of the script or your performance? No. So I would just do what they wanted. If they said they wanted coaching, if they wanted some rewriting, I wouldn't assume that I was the answer to all their problems. You know, you have to listen more and then take your next step based on how that goes. So if they want my opinion, I'm happy to give it. If they don't, I'm happy to just do my job.
Oh, that's good. Take notes, everybody. That was good. Everybody does not want your opinion.
Yeah, I'm writing that one down myself.
George, thank you so much. This was wonderful. I know I learned a lot, so I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me on. It was great.
Awesome. It worked out well because I'm not a quitter. Don't complain. Tell us how to make it better. You know someone who is in their own reset journey. Make sure you share this with them. And remember, a reset is always available to you.